Are you a gardener or an architect? Hi guys, today we're going to discuss architects versus gardeners, or in another way of saying it, a plotter versus a pantser. So first, what are they? An architect or a plotter is someone who plans out their writing before they begin to write. They normally know the major plot points, the structure of the entire novel, and the character arcs of all individual characters and the world that they have built the scene in very well. They often have loads of graphs, maps, bullet point journals, you name it, they've got it. Architects plan it all before they write it. Gardeners, or pantsers on the other hand, plant a seed and see what grows. So this means they write by the seat of their pants. They don't have an outline, they don't have a plan, they make up some characters and a world and they just see where it takes them. Sometimes they will obviously have a brief idea about the beginning, maybe the middle and the end, but what happens in between or how those characters get to that stage, they like to wait and find out. Obviously, the architect versus the gardener or the plotter versus the pantser argument is talking about two extremes. In most cases, writers are generally a mix of both. For example, I myself am more of an architect. I plan out my work before I write it, I make maps of the world, I make various rules and traditions. I have a table of contents for each character telling me their favourite colour, their height, what they like, what they dislike, and generally an idea of a brief character arc. And I have a rough outline chapter by chapter so I can see exactly what I'm going to write. I find that this means that when I sit down to write, I'm guaranteed to write a lot of words in one go because I don't need to think about what I'm going to write there. It's pretty much written down already, telling me you're going to write a chapter on blah 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 character in this room, they got to find this thing out. This makes it a lot easier to just write whenever I need to, so whenever I don't write, honestly, my only excuse is that I'm being lazy. However, on the other side of the spectrum, my partner is much more of a gardener. He has tried to outline his work before, but what generally happens is he fights against it. He hates rules, regulations, he hates being trapped in a box. So if he writes an outline, his characters and his brain are going to find a way out and divvy around it rather than going straight through. This does mean that I find my work, in my opinion, can be predictive. I know what's going to happen, so it's not a surprise. Whereas for his work, everything's a surprise because he doesn't even know where it's going. He doesn't know how the characters are going to get there. So the most common thing is I will ask him for advice when I'm in the planning stage. And when I'm writing, I generally will not ask for his advice until the very end when I've written the book and I give him it and go, read this please. Whereas for him, he will ask me questions throughout his entire writing process because he hasn't decided on a structure. He knows roughly where it's going to end, but that could change. So quite often our conversations are him saying, my character needs something like this to happen, but I'm not sure. I've got these 3 different options. Which one do you think is best? If I'm honest, our writing styles do represent our personality types. If you asked any of our friends, you could guarantee they would know that I'm going to plan something and he will wing it. It's just how we naturally behave anyway. I will wake up and I will have a to-do list and a schedule for the day where I will write for an hour, I'll read for an hour, I'm going to do this for an hour, then I'm going to exercise. Whereas he will wake up and if he gets anything creative done that day, he's pretty happy with himself. No expectation, it's fine. Both have pros and cons, of course. Sometimes I wish I was more relaxed and sometimes I'm sure he wishes he knew what was going on. But what is the same for both of the architect and gardener types is me and my partner, we both finish the work. We both get a finished product and ultimately they are both good techniques to follow for various reasons. Both have pros and both have cons. Beginning with architect. What are the pros? Pro 1, cohesive sense. As an architect, because you're planning your work before you even begin to write, it is likely that you've already found all of the plot holes, all of the twists, and you know what is coming. This means that when you're writing, you're far less likely to deviate, less likely to get confused with characters and have them go in the wrong direction, which also means that you can write in your first draft all the foreshadowing points that you need to hit. On the gardener's side, this is less likely and their characters could get lost and they could have plot holes. Pro 2, less drafts. I don't mean this as in your work will be perfect first time round. It will never be perfect first time round. But if you have planned your novel, then the amount of plans you go through before you begin to write also count as drafts. So if you've plotted your novel entirely, as said before with the cohesive sense, you might have already found any plot holes or errors in your structure. Therefore, when you write it, this should be something you don't have a problem with. Pro 3, write quicker. It just all comes out onto the page in one go because I already know what I'm going to write about, and if I do get stuck, I can just read through my structure and know where I'm going. If I get stuck on what a character would do in a situation, I can look at the table with my character's attributes and personality types and generally make an informed decision on it there. However, con 1, attachment. Because you've already planned out every phase of your novel, if there is a big problem or if your characters seem to go in another direction, you might be less likely to want to change the story as you've gone, which could mean you end up with a less interesting story compared to what you would have done if you had let the story take its natural course. Con 2, spark. Because you already know what's happening, you can foreshadow everything throughout the book in your first draft. However, another thing by knowing what's going to happen is you yourself are not as excited about what you're writing. You already know where the character is going and what they're going to do and how it's going to happen. So writing might not be as exciting for you, and then this could come across in your narrative voice. This is something gardeners, as we're about to discuss, don't have so much of a problem with. So gardeners, Pro 1, twists and turns. Because you don't know what's going to happen, everything is surprising, and this ultimately can mean that your story takes on very uncliche and interesting twists and turns, which if you'd plotted out your novel, you might have just been straight away or mightn't have even thought of. But because you've left it so lucid and letting it grow naturally, anything could happen, and your characters do the complete opposite to what they would have done at the start of the book. However, this leads on to con 1, uneven. Because your work isn't planned and your characters are going where they like, when they like, this can mean that certain parts of your novel are a lot bigger and more interesting than maybe the little middle bit where they're just sort of finding their feet and walking around the world you're making. It could also be all these different and interesting twists and turns are too complicated or aren't foreshadowed enough for it to be something a character would do. This is why, as an architect, you will edit slightly less because you've done these plots and twists in your plan, whereas the gardener will write the book and now they will do the plan of the structure and re-edit with the foreshadowing in for these twists and turns. Con number 2, writer's block. We all suffer from writer's block from time to time. It's a natural thing. You can just be too tired, you can be bored of your work, you could be in a surrounding that just doesn't suit you, doesn't make you feel comfortable or relaxed enough to write. All of these things you can control and you can change. But if you are a gardener, if you have writer's block because you're not sure where the character is going to go, you're gonna have to sit and think about it. Whereas the architect will not have this problem whilst they are writing because they've already done the sitting in the bath and having a shower and listening to music in the planning stage. So whilst they're writing, they can just see what I do that and write it down. Ultimately, most writers are a mix of both. Diana Callahan has a really good video on plotters versus pantsers, and she has a quiz in there where you can work out exactly which one you are. And she has made 5 different scales of it so you can place yourself accordingly. I will leave a link to that video below this one. I came out as a relaxed plotter. Ultimately, it is a spectrum like anything in life, and depending on what kind of book you're writing might dictate what type of planner you are. For example, writing a short story, you might want to be a gardener, and just see where it goes. I write short stories for all of my characters, and sometimes I like to just let it flow a little bit. Whereas if you were writing, say, a crime novel, you might need to know every detail, especially if it is like Sherlock Holmes level, where the minutest hint is what your character will find. That's something you might want to plan out before your pen hits the paper. The main aim is just to do what feels right to you, and if you want to try the opposite, give it a go. There's nothing wrong with it. You might find a technique which helps. As long as you get your book finished, you can edit it at the end, or you can edit as you go. Finish your work in the way that suits you. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe to this channel. If you'd like to see as soon as I upload, click that little bell down below. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram or Tumblr. I post general bookish pictures as well as my writing tips and unboxings on there. If you would like to see these tips in written form, you can go to my website. The link is below this video. And thanks for watching, guys. Bye!